Hello everyone, I'm Jeanette Camping from Henry Stewart Events, and I'd like to welcome you to our latest webinar, Automating Creative Compliance, sponsored by IntelligenceBank. We've got a large global audience of DAM professionals registered today, and we'd like to thank you all for joining. There will be time during the webinar for Q&A, so please send in any questions that you have. And we are recording today's session, and you'll all be sent a link to view again later. Now it's my great pleasure to welcome our presenters, Adam Nowitzki and Chris Yates. Thank you both for joining us, and over to you, Adam. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks, Jeanette. Appreciate it. And hi, everyone. My name's Adam Nowitzki. I'm the SVP of Growth here at IntelligenceBank. I'm based here in Los Angeles, and my colleague, Chris Yates, Senior Manager of Market Operations at Tabcorp, is going to be our special guest today. So I'd like to make him feel welcome, and looking forward to having a discussion regarding automating creative compliance. So just moving forward, I wanted to really just give a high-level overview of what we're going to discuss today. So Tabcorp is a global organization focused around the development of wagering brands, offering a very broad range of betting experiences across digital channels and in retail throughout multiple states across Australia. Tabcorp's actually in the top 20 of global betting and gaming agencies around the world with $1 billion market capitalization. So Chris, I guess outside of that, just a bit of an insight into your role and Tabcorp in general, and a pretty sizable marketing department as well.
Yeah, thanks, Adam, and hello, everyone. So Tabcorp is the largest, Australia's largest wagering sports betting company. We take bets on sport and all our racing codes. We employ more than 5,000 people. We've got nearly 1 million customers, and we work in over 4,000 retail venues across Australia. Been around for 60 years. So yeah, I'm part of a pretty big marketing team here at Tabcorp. There's probably about 80 of us, close to. So we're a high volume kind of a marketing area, but the nature of our business means we've got pretty short timeframes responding to competitors and trying to be as nimble as we can. We advertise across all channels, therefore need lots of different specs for all our creative. And due to the nature of our business, we're really highly regulated environment, being a betting organisation. So we're regulated in 7 different Australian states, and they've got different rules governing what we can and cannot do. Those rules are pretty complex and change all the time. So in summary, I guess my area is a pretty high volume area, have short time frames, and we work in a pretty complex regulatory environment.
Terrific. We appreciate that and that insight into your background, Chris. Certainly regulated environments are certainly more the norm than the exception. You'd be quite surprised about the amount of organizations that might not consider themselves to be in regulated environments or have a high degree of compliance, but there's certainly that. Just a bit for our audience about IntelligenceBank. Many of you have heard of us. IntelligenceBank is a cloud-based marketing operations platform, which is the reasons why we're talking about today's topic. And our solutions very much include digital asset management, which we've always been known for, a brand management platform, which we call Brand Hub, which certainly gets utilized by the likes of Tabcorp and hundreds of others, including areas such as creative templates, of course. And then finally, a marketing operations or an MRM platform, marketing resource management platform, for managing large teams and projects as well. And what makes IntelligenceBank really different, or certainly stands out, is our real focus on the intersection between efficiency and compliance, and really we're in a world where really the demand for creative continues to explode. And that is just as important in terms of speed and efficiency, but particularly in regulated environments, whether that's in gaming, whether that's in healthcare, finance, consumer packaged goods services, etc. It's that increasing brand and regulatory compliance that is a big focus for that. And certainly this is where IntelligenceBank has a long history of success. And just to give this audience a wider view of the suite of tools that we believe work together, we call this the power of one. And this is really focused on IntelligenceBank bringing together all those elements that really do create that compliance regime, particularly around creative production and efficiency. So of course, we've got digital asset management. Our MRM capability focuses in the area of briefs and forms and approvals. We've created a remarkable disclaimer engine, which Chris is going to go into a little bit of detail about how they work there. And of course, things such as campaign workflows, brand portals, and of course, creative templates, which we offer our own platform powered by Print UI, and of course we integrate via our API first methodology, which Chris has been able to utilize in his role at Tabcorp as well. So that's just a little bit about us, so you understand that certain process about IntelligenceBank and how we fit in this world. And I thought I might just put up this slide as well. The latest Forrester Wave for what we call marketing resource management, very much in this wheelhouse. IntelligenceBank has been recently marked as one of the main contenders in this space. And we've achieved some of the highest scores possible regarding content production process, brand compliance, and content integration criteria, which are really key areas, for example, where Chris and his team really do focus. So we'll be sharing the Tabcorp's method for automating that creative compliance, as well as how they manage the marketing operations within the IntelligenceBank platform. So just as a brief summary before we get into it, we're going to talk about the challenges that the Tabcorp team have faced prior to coming to IntelligenceBank, the solutions that were put on the table and then accepted and started to enact, and of course the results that we have. And then finally at the end, as mentioned earlier, we'll have some questions available as well. So let's get stuck into it. Chris, we want to look a little bit deeper about how Tabcorp does juggle that high volume, and you've talked about that in your introduction, but also that those elements between compliance and efficiency. Do you want to give us a little bit of insight into some of these areas, what happened before IntelligenceBank, focusing in areas such as errors and compliance breaches, etc. Just kind of your take on what happened prior to IntelligenceBank coming on.
Sure. Yeah, as I said, the area that I work in is high volume, had short time frames, worked in a complex regulatory environment. Suffice to say, a few years ago, we were having a lot of issues. Whilst we had, some really good intentions of doing the right thing and complying to regulations and not having issues, we were having quite a lot of issues, and we're just not set up for success. So the slide here summarizes some of the issues we were having. So yeah, lots of errors, lots of compliance breaches, and this was starting to have, financial penalties, legal costs, inviting, greater regulatory scrutiny on us, having reputational damage to our company. So yeah, we're in a bit of trouble looking back a few years. So yeah, as part of the solution, we engaged IntelligenceBank to help us with some of our problems.
Yeah, and I think in our conversations previously, and I was involved in some of the earlier conversations with Tabcorp, some of these I guess requirements came right from above at a pretty high level within the Tabcorp organization, because they realized that the last thing you want to be doing is having to deal with regulatory breaches. Did that message get passed loud and clear down the line, and had the creative and automation team kind of realized maybe how the potential downfalls of the way you were working put the organization?
Yeah, we were well aware of the problems at that point, and yeah, it has right from the board down. It was a serious issue that the company was taking really seriously. But yeah, it wasn't like we weren't trying, but we just weren't set up for success. So yeah.
Yeah, understood. Well, very interesting to consider that, and kind of moving on to I guess the challenge, and I think this is kind of going more to the overarching challenge for today's session is centered around actually the Tabcorp Spring Racing Carnival. And I'll I guess Chris, for those who aren't aware of what the Spring Racing Carnival, do you want to just give us a brief understanding about that process?
Yeah, so the Spring Racing Carnival is by far our busiest time of the year. It's probably a 10-week period from September to November, where all our biggest horse races of the year are on. There's a bit of a carnival atmosphere in Australia. Everyone gets around it. We've all got our football code finals at the same time, so a lot of playoffs and grand finals, etc. So there's a stack of sport and racing occurring across this time. So it's Christmas time for sports fans, but it can be a little stressful in the office during this time. Yeah, so it's really busy.
I could imagine it's certainly a good time across Australia in terms of the way that people gamble and bet on I guess what is one of the most important racing calendars around the world. So just going over some quick stats, in a 10-week period with a team of graphic designers, I guess this is the result before the problem, you were able to produce 9,500 assets. I think we need to take a moment and just realize that's 9,500 assets. It's a lot of work. You did that with 0 errors. Can you explain kind of that result to us, and then we're going to kind of move back through the challenge post that.
Yeah, so something we're really proud of. If we looking back a few years and thinking we could get to this point, would never believe it. So we're really proud of this. The achievement. IntelligenceBank has helped us a lot through this. It's been a lot of hard work, sweat and tears to get to this point. But yeah, it's a really proud of the team. Really proud of what we've done, and almost to the point now where we just take it that we're compliant. We don't make errors, and we can get on with serving our customer and adding value.
Chris, do you know what the, and probably hard to put a figure onto it, but what the error rate was prior to coming into this? Was it that the error rate was high enough for you to have to keep on going back to the start again, or back to a certain point and have to redo that work? Was that the scenario?
Yeah, it was. I guess there was a lot of errors and a lot of rework, and we'd capture capture a lot of them before they went out, but a lot of them went out the door, and there's a lot of errors. So you can see, I guess we show a graph of compliance issues and errors, and you can just see it over a period of time over the last few years, just reduced to almost nothing at the current point.
Yeah, great, excellent. So I think I guess, Chris, I'd imagine with all that creation of a workflow process and approval process, that really did necessitate this concept of, and we'll kind of discuss, this is more on the MLM side of the IntelligenceBank platform, the marketing resource and market operations side of the platform, that it really did necessitate the concept of using briefs for the complex content and for short timelines. IntelligenceBank allows you to be able to kind of customize those campaign briefs for complex content, legal input, as well as outputs. Can you tell us a little bit more about potentially what was there before these briefs became online, and how were you managing that, and what did the briefs do for you?
So just to explain a little bit, I guess the requirements for our briefs are quite complicated. So what we're allowed to do for all our different channels that we advertise in, for different states, we've got different disclaimers, different responsible gambling messages that we have to do. We're allowed to advertise in some states, not others, depending on what the message is. So it's quite complicated. So our previous briefing process was just inadequate. The document we were using was long, it was complex. People didn't know the legislation well enough. Often you have new people come into the company who don't know it well enough. So I guess it was just easy to make errors with briefing, and the system didn't support it to get it right. So I guess the main change now with IntelligenceBank is we've got a really sophisticated brief. It's got some really smart functionality in it that minimizes the possibility of an error. So it restricts outputs based on, in terms of responsible gambling messages and the jurisdictions that we advertise in, based on the inputs of the briefing process. So, what type of message it is, where we want to advertise, etc., what channels we're using. So, for example, an inducement television commercial with a minimum bet offer cannot be shown in Tasmania or New South Wales, and the brief doesn't allow you to choose that. So it limits the mistakes you can make. Yeah. Just take a bit of human out of the process, and no more complicated Word documents.
And of course, discussing humans is a really great segue. There's also the human element to this, the idea that you do actually have to engage a fair amount of people in your organization to start doing things potentially a slightly different way, obviously using IntelligenceBank. What was the kind of the feedback, and what's the feedback been in terms of, for example, this briefing process? Have you had decent reception back, or good reception back from the users to say, hey, this is a lot easier, I can now be more confident in briefing you guys in?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it didn't go all smoothly, especially in the early days when we didn't quite get the brief right and we had to tweak it over a period of time. But yeah, 6 months after we implemented IntelligenceBank and looking back at some of the more experienced members of the team, thinking that was, it was wonderful. They just didn't have to worry about, all the different complexities of getting it right. But yeah, not to say it wasn't easy. We had to get it right. It took a lot of analysis and a lot of hard work to get the brief just as we needed to get it.
Of course. So we talked about, I guess you talked about those standard workflows. We can't ignore the other part of that, which is having a very strict approval process as well. And part of the outstanding metrics that we started off, I guess, this conversation with, could we really be tied to having a strict and a standardized approval process? process. Can you tell us a little bit more about that approach, the approach of Tabcorp's approval process, and how they kind of feed it into this process as well?
Yeah, so I guess it was a board, because we're having so many issues, a board mandate that all our marketing assets, like 100% of everything that we did, needed to be approved by our legal team. So yeah, there was a very strict approval process and a 4-stage approval process where the design manager had to approve the design, marketing managers had to approve the assets that were being created, legal had to approve different assets, and our responsible gambling team also. So it was 4 different areas approving. So again, IntelligenceBank has been great, is being able to set up a really robust workflow where work filters through to all those different 4 areas to get the approvals that we need. Yeah, to get the job done. Yeah.
And the feedback.
We had a lot of feedback, so things aren't quite right. So it takes, the workflow takes care of feedback and reapprovals and all that kind of stuff, and you got lots of visibility around where things are at as well.
And once again, based on kind of those approvers and those approvals, those individuals who approved, e.g. legal and compliance, are not necessarily marketing people. What was their kind of initial impressions and uptake of having that very solid audit trail of approval process? Did you find that they, from a change management perspective, that they got onto that pretty quickly?
Yeah, and they did. And like us, the legal team is not just one, there's a whole bunch of them, and to be able to allocate work to each of those individuals and for them to know what work they had to do and to manage their time, and the responsible gambling team as well, that was all really good. But we did fight a lot with our lawyers, especially in the early days. Got a much better relationship with them now, but they didn't really want to be checking marketing assets for spelling mistakes and stupid mistakes that we're making. So yeah, but yeah, that relationship has improved over time as well.
Great. Well, certainly for the harmony of the rest of the organization, that's an important one, to have legal and compliance on side. We're going to also kind of pivot towards, I guess, the same lines, but the legal content must have been a huge focus given your industry. What were things such as dashboards? How have they kind of helped you in just determining, what briefing processes or what briefs had been completed, or at an individual level? Has that been an important focus for you guys as well?
Yeah. So the platform's great with the dashboards that it's got and the reports that you can run to find out where work is and how long things are taking. So it's a big team, and for me, who was running, having overseeing the process, having these dashboards and being able to set them up to get a snapshot of where work is, where there's bottlenecks, how we can manage things accordingly, work out where errors are occurring, and do some root cause analysis has been really good. So yeah.
Very important. I wanted to touch a little bit on, I guess, standardized workflows and ensuring that you really do have those consistent procedures for ensuring that the teams collaborate well. I guess this is, touching on that kind of real first solution and how we're able to achieve those outstanding results. Explain to us how having a standardized workflow has helped you and your team. And a good example of that is the Kanban task management, or I guess of task briefs, etc., that might come into play for Tabcorp. That standardized workflow, what changes did you have to make? Did you have to make changes to fit into the system, or was it vice versa, etc.?
Oh, it took some. We had some teething problems, and I guess, yeah, the message here is you've got to just work at it. You get out of it what you put into it. So we had to, work really hard to get the workflow that really made sense for us, that wasn't overly burdensome on the company, wasn't too much red tape, but there was the appropriate approvals and the appropriate, So yeah, it took time. We would have, weekly stand-ups to talk about what was working, what wasn't, making the slight adjustments, working with IntelligenceBank to really refine those workflow systems. Yeah.
Chris, did you find that in those, I guess, workflow environments, that once again, based on the complexity sometimes of your process, that having it in one platform as opposed to, I'm assuming maybe some other processes were via email or via messaging, etc. Did you find that the engagement across multiple teams did start to increase, and you start to kind of see more and more, I guess, consistent results because everything was centralized? Was that the case?
Absolutely, yeah. So I think when we compare it to what we used to have, there was lots of different processes. So some people use by email, using different systems, using shared drives. Having the operational rigor, I guess, through IntelligenceBank, through the platform, has really helped. And I think it's been interesting looking back a little bit, because we've got a whole bunch of new people that have come through, and that's just the way we do it now. So you induct people, this is how we do it, this is our processes, and people get on with it. Yeah.
Yep, terrific. I wanted to just briefly, because we've got a large digital asset management focused audience here. Tell me a little bit more about the state of play prior to IntelligenceBank coming on, and as we've discussed before, IntelligenceBank's I guess infancy in well over a decade ago was very much focused around digital asset management, and we still certainly do a lot of work in the digital asset management platform. It's actually the core of the market operations platform. Tell us a little bit more about the way that you managed assets and the way that you tracked assets, both those that were in progress or work in progress files, etc., and then potentially what today looks like, and potentially what that rigor has been able to achieve from a self-service perspective as well within the content.
Probably not painting our area in a great light of what it used to be like, but I think back to where we used to keep assets. They're on servers, they're on shared drives in certain teams folders that other teams didn't have access to. They're on email trails, and people would leave and you'd lose them. Now everything goes through IntelligenceBank. Everything gets stored in our DAM. It's all tagged, it's all searchable, easy to find. So when we're doing campaigns on a football finals, we can look at last year's football finals and see what we did. We can search for different specs that we need. It's kept centrally, and everything's there. It's really good.
Are you finding that the relationship between the assets themselves and potentially the workflow processes is a lot more cohesive now, given that they do live in the same place?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, the guys who are mostly creating the work, the designers, easy to upload into IntelligenceBank, easy to get it approved, easy to store it, easy to refer to it later on. It's great.
Terrific. I guess on those same lines, one of the things that we all know about working in any, I guess, creative capacity is, there's never ever just one version of an asset. There's multiple versions. Tell us a little bit more about, that version control and that visibility, and potentially, what have you been able to achieve because you've got that tight control versioning?
It is a real important thing for us to get our version control sorted. Often, artwork goes through different versions and different feedback loops, and we had a problem where things would go through a number of different versions, but then the wrong one would get dispatched to our publisher, and the wrong one would go live. So what's great about IntelligenceBank is the different versions are all allowed for. Once the assets are approved, that one can be dispatched straight from the system rather than having to download, send an email or whatever. It can be straight dispatched from the system. So largely our version control issues have vanished as well.
Yeah, that's a pretty important one. The worst thing you could do is send out the previous version, but also having those permissions and controls. So if you do need to roll back a version, you've got that ability to be able to do that within the platform as well, and have a complete audit trail of those. And I think that's a nice, once again, segue back against here. And I'm not quite sure whether this is the case, but certainly in other regulated industries, that audit trail is actually probably one of the key elements. What regulators want to see is, what process did this go through? What approval process did this go through? Tell us a little bit more about that audit transparency that you've currently got that you may not have had before, and potentially what the benefit of that has been dealing in such a highly regulated environment.
Yeah, so just had an internal audit done recently on our systems. And it's so easy to work, to look back in the system, who's approved different assets, when they did it, time, what levels of reapproval did it have to go through, etc. So or when there is an error or when there is a problem, you can go back and try to work out, what's happened, who did it, why did they do it, when did they do it, and look at the different versions that have been approved, etc. So great audit trails.
And are those audits that you're doing, are those internal audits, or are you having regulators ask those questions as well?
Oh, usually the regulators don't ask, but unless something goes wrong. So and then we have to do a deep dive into see how did this happen. But as I said, those are pretty rare at the moment. But
and gathering those now, I assume, are a lot easier. You don't have to kind of try multiple emails.
Run a report as well, and get a lot of big data, and you can do some analysis on that too. Who's doing all the approvals, etc.
Great. Excellent. Taking another step towards, and this is a unique feature of the IntelligenceBank platform used by so many of our clients, particularly those in highly regulated industries such as banking and finance, healthcare, gaming, consumer packaged goods, etc. is this idea of a disclaimer engine. And I guess, knowing a little bit about the industry that you work in, but also tangential industries, as I said, with financial services and healthcare. Marketers are not great at knowing which is the right disclosure or which is the right disclaimer to put on any type of ad, but I think it's really amplified in your industry, particularly with the speed and I guess the variety of, for example, different states that you work in. The IntelligenceBank disclaimer engine was built purposefully to help marketers simplify and automate that approval process, but also help them get used to understanding what those disclosures and disclaimers should be. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you're using that platform or that part of the platform as well?
Yeah, so I guess whilst getting our marketing operations, like what I call under control, has been hugely satisfying, in terms of reducing our compliance issues, streamlining our workflow. I think even more satisfying has been the work we've done in automating much of our asset creation through the use of disclaimer engines and templates, self-service templates, and it has an absolutely huge impact on our business. So I guess the first part was, making sure we're not making errors and being a compliant business. Now the next part of it, and the really good, which has allowed us to get through last year's spring with such a high volume of assets and low errors, has been the self-service templates and our disclaimer engine. So maybe just to explain that a little bit, I think the problem we were having was we're creating more and more assets every month, every year, which is taking up more designer resources, taking up more legal resources, and we're still too slow to market. So I think working with IntelligenceBank over a fairly long period of time, we've created now over 150 templates that allow marketing team members, so not necessarily designers, to create their own assets for all our different types of offers and the communications that we do. So we call these self-service templates. How they work is a template's created by the design team with certain fields that can be changed, and creative briefs through IntelligenceBank have been linked to these templates via an API. And so bespoke assets can be made simply by the use of drop-down menus and free text fields that the marketing team can jump in there and do it. And up to 24 different spec sizes can be made, and these are all got different disclaimers based on the channel these specs are going to and where they're being published. And that can all be done automatically. No one has to think about it. And they can be done quick and easily. So they're not simple templates, they're really quite complicated with all our different offers, all our different jurisdictions, all our different options that we can have. They look after all our racing codes, all our sporting codes, assets can change. It's really clever. And so, you fill in the drop-down menu, a marketer can create their own assets. Within 5 or 10 minutes, you've got 24 assets that are compliant. They don't need legal approval because the templates have been approved by legal. We know the disclaimer's right, and they can be published straight away. So you can talk more about that if you like, Adam, but that's had a huge impact on our business over the last 12 months.
Yeah, absolutely. And we hear this from clients time and time again that have that want to create an automation where they're required to do so much work, right? And there's so much variety based on potentially one job skin, right? And the idea is that you want to be able to provide that templating capability, but also do it at scale, but keep in mind the fact that there are so many variables as part of that as well. And I understand the disclaimer engine kind of was a second phase of the implementation. Tell us a little bit more about kind of what happened prior. How were you creating these assets prior to? What was potentially what was the times? What's the time saving? And some of this could be really easily measured, maybe some not so easily measured. What was the process prior to this being implemented?
Well, the process was terribly complicated, and there was and there's a lot of information that a designer and a marketing team member need to know about our disclaimers and and there's plenty of opportunity to get it wrong. You get 8 things right and 1 thing wrong, and your disclaimer is wrong. So you can see here on the screen here that our disclaimers are quite complicated, and there's lots of inputs into those, and they need to change based on what channel we're advertising in and the size of the spec and the information on the asset. So it was hard before, and now it's easier. Much easier.
Has it seen a reduction in errors on this side of things as well? I mean, are we seeing Yeah. Okay.
I guess, and Spring has shown that we didn't make one error during that 10-week period. Yeah.
Yeah. And in terms of, once again, the engagement, so who is actually using these templates? Can you give us a bit of an understanding of the persona who's engaged?
So previously, where the briefs used to start from was the marketing team. They'd asked the design team to make them some assets. Now they make their own so it's got up to 30-35% of all of our assets that we create now are self-service. So the marketing team, go into IntelligenceBank, fill in drop-down menus, and create something like you can see on the screen here.
Do you see there is a positive impact on the marketing team, sorry, on the design team that can now focus more on larger, more strategic projects as opposed to kind of these, well, I guess ad hoc, but nonetheless as important? Have you had the feedback from the design?
So the designers love it because a lot of their day was filled with doing repetitive tasks, doing similar things that they did the day before. Just need to be update different content in that asset. So now, a lot of that's been taken off them, and we pay these guys to be creative and do some interesting design work, and they like that too. So now we're using their skills much more effectively. They're enjoying their jobs more. They're engaged more. It's a win-win.
Terrific. And does that feedback come back once again? I'm assuming there's some reporting of kind of the investment and the time that you've taken with the IntelligenceBank platform, and as head of marketing operations, do you get feedback at a kind of a C level about the impact? Do you provide feedback to senior decision makers across the organization about the impact of this platform and how it's potentially impacted work ratios? We're going to get stuck into this in a second about kind of the results, but is there any kind of ad hoc feedback that you're getting walking by the water cooler, etc., from teammates?
Well, it's interesting. I think we've got a few new senior managers in the area, and I guess they weren't quite aware of how important all this stuff is because it was just being looked after. There weren't issues, there weren't burning houses to put out. But I think as they knew the business more and more and looked at what could go wrong and what wasn't going wrong, I think they're much more appreciative of what we were getting right. Yeah.
Terrific.
And having a look at just the increase in the amount of assets that we're creating with the same staffing levels, to market a lot faster, etc. So
and of course zero errors, which not only kept the internal auditors away but also the external ones as well from a fines perspective, which is always very important. We've definitely got a saying at IntelligenceBank as we help organizations ensure that they don't get fired or sued by regulators and others as well. So the opportunity to be able to become really efficient and actually also really enjoy the work that you're doing because you've got those tools in place to be able to help you run through those processes and do them efficiently as well. No one would say no to an efficient process, particularly in an organization of your size. And once again, 80+ people in your marketing and creative teams, they've got certainly better things to do than do changes of fonts and things like that on templates. Can certainly be done by the marketing team, of course, as well. So just to kind of recap, and we're going to go into the results in a second, where at Tabcorp kind of focused on the following solutions. It was ensuring that we had really strong briefs for what we call, I guess, complex content, and the ability to also, and I'm assuming you're getting a little bit of this as well. We didn't touch on this quite there, Chris, but those briefs that we saw in one of those first slides, you've also got the ability to make changes to those briefs on the fly. Is that correct? When you do have requests?
We do it all the time. Yep, we change the form, easy to change, update, streamline, optimize it, make it easier for everyone to use.
Yeah, great. So that's, I guess, from a return on investment perspective, and just to actually have ownership of your product, IntelligenceBank has spent a lot of time focusing on that, I guess, front-end configuration capability, so that when you've got a complex brief, you can actually make a change, because we do know that things change all the time, particularly in regulated industries. We then touched on those strict approval processes, and that's once again that ability to ensure that everything gets approved and you've got a full audit trail against those elements. Those standardized workflows is important, and of course having those assets in the one place, but having them part of what we call your greater MRM platform, your greater marketing resources management platform, ensures that they actually work in tandem, that the assets that you create are part of the project that you've started earlier. And once again, vice versa, you don't often have assets unless there's a project or a process in place prior to that as well. And then finally, we kind of talked about disclaimer engines and creative templates. And I certainly think the creative templating solution, would you say, was probably had the largest impact just in terms of efficiency across the board, Chris?
Totally.
In terms of the solution?
Absolutely.
Yeah, terrific.
So the first part of the project's all been about getting it right. The second part is all being about how do we be more effective, more efficient, more effective.
Great. Yeah, I agree with that. So we kind of wanted to look a little bit about some of the results that you've had, and this is kind of stunning, right? Because I had to do a double take when I saw this. The reduction in timeline that you've had, taking less time, producing more assets with greater compliance. It's almost like the holy trinity of digital asset management and marketing operations. We're taking a lot quicker to do things. We're doing more, and we're doing it better. Is this true?
Yep.
20
That's
minutes?
True. Yep. Yeah, so I guess previously the process was, a marketing team had to brief the design team. They had to give them notice, give them a couple of days notice. Then the design team would create something. It'd go through design approvals. Then it would go through all the various approvals. Our legal team had a 48-hour turnaround. Then things get approved and dispatched and published. So when you have a look at the end-to-end process, it can take over a week to get a campaign to market. Now, marketing team, once an offer is confirmed and they can do it, they can jump on the system, create their own assets. Don't need to be legally approved because the template's approved. They get buddy checked and they get it out the door. So yeah, we can do it much quicker than we ever used to. We can respond to competitors now much quicker. We no longer miss opportunities that we could have had. My story is on numerous occasions when something's happened on a Saturday morning at the races, or an event's been rained out or something, and we need to change our offers. I've created the assets myself, and I've got no design skills whatsoever, in my pajamas on a Saturday morning, and published it and put it on the website and our app, all by myself. So, and not having to wake up designers to get them to do an urgent job on the weekend. So yeah, it's been really good.
It's amazing. You can't account for that. I guess those crazy situations where you do have to kind of just get onto it really quickly, even on the weekend as well. But that efficiency is mind blowing. And as I said, I had to do a double take when I kind of saw this. But 20 minutes is a pretty significant saving on somewhere between 7 to 10 days. And you're probably going to get a happier set of kind of approvers and workflow people involved, because they don't have to kind of be bugged all the time to, hey, would you mind approving this, etc. They just get that automatic notification. Excellent. So on to result number 2. This is once again another stunning statistic. 1/3 of all the artwork that goes through, and we're talking about thousands of pieces of I guess, of collateral across the organization, but 1/3 of that artwork is channeled through these templates. Do you want to give us that kind of the overall kind of benefit of that as well? And we might just
we've graphed the results over a period of time, and we've been doing these templates, for over 12 months now. And it just, as we do more templates, we do more offer, we do it's got to, I think in February it was even over 40%. I have to do my reporting yet, but yeah, it's becoming a big portion of what we do.
Wow,
it's fantastic.
Yeah, and I can imagine once again more time back to the design team to focus on much more strategic projects as well. I'm sure that's one of the things that they're really happy about as well. And I guess nice segue then. That creative team now has a significant reduction in workload.
So
yeah, what's the feedback?
Yeah, so the designers have obviously had drastically reduced their requirement on them, so they can do more, like we said, more interesting work. They can do more work, and we can do more things with them. Our legal team also, obviously, these things now no longer need to go through legal. Legal resources aren't cheap, so yeah, we've reduced a whole bunch of workload on them, so they can focus their skills on what they do best. Yeah, so both areas now spend more time adding value to the business, and more just the marketing team generally. It's not following up where things are at and pushing things along through the process. It's just less handoffs. Yeah, so it's been great.
And you're also seeing some obviously automation in reminders. Now we're not perfect. We are only human beings, and we sometimes do forget things, and we might see something in our inbox and we might ignore that, for example. Have you set up where IntelligenceBank does kind of send reminders to say, hey, listen, if this isn't approved after a certain date, are your colleagues getting that automation?
We haven't probably needed to. I've got a pretty good offsider who really make sure that things there's no bottlenecks and things are being pushed through the process. Yeah, so yeah, there is that functionality, but we don't necessarily use it. No.
It's a well-oiled machine, and you've got some good people working with you. You keep everyone honest, which is great. And I guess just the last couple of slides here before we move into some questions. One of the big, I guess, driving points or driving factors for the implementation of a platform like IntelligenceBank, its MRM, market operations and digital asset management platform, was that you were getting into some trouble by regulators because the compliance just wasn't there. And not only did it take, not only was there potential penalties to that, but it was also a time suck as well, having to go back and redo things. The zero, I would assume the zero errors meant zero penalties since then?
Yeah, so there's still different compliance issues from time to time. I'm not saying there's none, but yeah, the seriousness of those is dramatically reduced. Yeah, just it's not an issue in the company anymore.
Of course. Really. And I think just finally touching on, you talked about the competitive nature of your industry, and like very much like even industries such as banking and finance and healthcare and strangely enough even government. That increased revenue through speed to market is a really important factor. Have you been able to kind of measure that and ascertain capacity?
It's probably a bit difficult to measure, but yeah, we're much more nimble now. We can when a competitor makes a change early in the week, we can respond, like I said, within 20 minutes. Yeah, we're not missing opportunities. We can do more assets now, and we can be more personalized in our offering to our customers, and we can segment our customers more, and we can just do more by state or by customer segment, etc. So yeah, we can just do more than we used to be able to do.
That's sometimes a hard one to measure, but you kind of know when it's happening. You've got the time on your hands to kind of get back to that as well, which is really interesting. Well, Chris, thank you. We appreciate the insight that you've provided. We're going to head over to questions very shortly. I am going to just do a shameless plug for those that do want to see a personalized demo of the IntelligenceBank platform. Please feel free to email us with the subject Henry Stewart webinar on there. We'd love to be able to show you how we can help your organization as well. We know that organizations like Tabcorp and people like Chris have had the benefit of kind of making the right decision when it came to their workflow solutions. Generally, no problem is too big to solve, and that's certainly what we're focused on as well. So we might take an opportunity to turn to Henry Stewart and start with some questions if we have any.
Thank you so much, both of you. Yes, we have had some questions. And let's dive straight in. So the first one was, did you get pushback from marketing moving the work to them instead of creative? Budgets and labour hours are tight.
Initially we did, yes, because the marketing team said, no, how come I have to create my own assets? And then but at the start of the process, it was a bit more time consuming. That we've got to now where it's only 5 or 10 minutes. But overall, the marketing team are over the moon because no longer do they have to brief something, wait days, follow things up. Yeah, they're more than happy to do it themselves now. It's an overall big time saving for them.
Thank you. And then someone's asked, what was it about the IntelligenceBank offering that made them the right fit for Tabcorp?
We went through a pretty extensive review with a whole bunch of different competitors, looked at what we needed, did comparisons. Yeah, it was just as I was arriving to the company actually, so I wasn't a part of that process, but yeah, yeah, we did a lot of due diligence, and yeah, IntelligenceBank was clearly the winner.
Terrific. Chris, was there something in particular about the IntelligenceBank platform that you could see that, I guess, after being there, and not sure if you were there for the, I guess, the original kind of reviews of platforms Was things such as configurability or those types of things probably one of the key focuses?
Yeah, I think it was all the things we talked about, the dashboards and the ability to report and the visibility of where things are at. I think before everything was, no one could see where all the work was at. And yes, the configurability to be able to make it our own was a huge part of the choice, yes.
Great.
Thank you. Someone's asked, how long was the transition from old world to IntelligenceBank?
Well, I think bringing the platform on was, like I said, we brought it on and we've done a number of iterations since then. Initially, in the first 6 months, we probably had 3 different iterations of our creative brief and the workflow and optimizing that. The first one wasn't a dream. Second one was better, and the third one was really good. So that did probably take 3 to 6 months initially to get it right. And then we've continued to make improvements, over the last few years. If we're talking about the templates and the big efficiency and effectiveness gains, that's been the last 12 to 18 months of slowly building up and learning and optimizing to get that right. To learn a lot of work to get to that point. It hasn't been easy, but yeah, it's been a journey.
Good, thank you. Someone's asked, can you describe a little bit more about how the platform was implemented, and was it done in phases?
So it was implemented in phases. We didn't have the templates and we didn't have the disclaimer engine at the start. So it was more just at the start getting our basic workflow set up and our basic briefing, our campaign brief set up. Yeah, and just built on it from there. Yeah, so we didn't solve all the problems all at once. Got used to the platform, optimized it, and built on it over time. Yeah.
Thank you. If anyone else has got any questions, do send them in now. But I think that was the last one.
Oh yeah, there is one. Yeah, there was one more. So this question's just come in. Tell us more about your post-implementation experience. So a little bit, I guess, possibly a little bit more about how the customer success and kind of the ongoing kind of relationship that you've got with IntelligenceBank. How's that been, and how big a part of that has played in your success?
Yeah, so we've got a great relationship with IntelligenceBank. They've been really supportive. I think it is, with all of these things that we've talked about here, it has been a real team effort. So we obviously know our business and what the requirements are. IntelligenceBank obviously know their platform and what it can do and what it can't do. So especially early on, I think it was really, the onus was on us to understand what we wanted and what we needed, and then ask the right questions. And IntelligenceBank got a lot of really smart people that have been able to help us. Yeah, and it has developed over time. So, yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Jeanette?
That's it, I think. Thank you very much, both of you. Excellent presentation, great feedback coming in. So we'll draw it to a close. Did you want to say anything else before we finish?
Yeah, I guess on my end, once again, thanks so much to Chris. He's been great. Great to learn a little bit about a different industry as well. I think so many of us in this space kind of focus on kind of very standardized industries such as banking, finance, insurance, healthcare, tourism products, etc. To hear a unique case regarding gambling and gaming, where we probably wouldn't have expected so much regulation and kind of workflow process as well. So that's been a really interesting one. And once again, for those that are interested, we're obviously more than happy to have a conversation with you and show you what we can do, like exactly what we did with Chris and the team at Tabcorp as well. And so thank you, Chris.
No problem. Thanks, guys.
Thank you both. Thanks, everyone. I hope to see you at another event very soon. Bye all.